Hey there, Pyromaniacs, it's that time of year again. The time that once belonged to E3, but now belongs to basically whoever has the funds to create a showcase. No, seriously, why are there so many of these now? It was so much easier when it was just the Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony showcases, but now we have stuff like Future Games Show, Wholesome Direct, Future of Play, Day of the Devs. It's getting kinda ridiculous. Nobody has the time to keep up with all these, so I usually just watch the Big Three and Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest thing. And now that the showcase season is more or less over, it's time for me to finally share my candid thoughts on what I saw. I'm not going to talk about everything, just the stuff that I found interesting or just wanted to talk about for some reason. I actually wanted to make this video way sooner, but I decided to kind of wait and see if Nintendo would put something out, and sure enough, they did. And then when writing my notes for this video, it ended up becoming more of a loose script than anything, so this is going to be kind of a half-scripted, half-unscripted video. So without further ado, let's start out with PlayStation's State of Play, which was only 30 minutes long, with the first 10 minutes having to do with this game called Concord that was teased last year. It started out with a CGI trailer that actually kind of got me invested. A lot of people online said it looked like Guardians of the Galaxy, but I kind of almost saw it as sort of this fusion of Guardians of the Galaxy, and for some reason I kept getting like Cowboy Bebop vibes. I have no clue why, but for some reason I kept getting Cowboy Bebop vibes, and then like at the end of the trailer, the ship that they were in was like red, so my brain like associated that with the Bebop as well. Other than that, it looks nothing like Cowboy Bebop, but either way, I was kind of interested. I was kind of vibing with it. I was thinking like, oh, is this gonna be like a co-op shooter? Is this gonna be like a story-based game? Like, are we gonna be able to like, you know, pilot these ships? I was kind of curious. I was interested in like, where's this gonna go? And then they showed the gameplay, and it's an Overwatch clone. It's actually impressive just how quickly I checked out during this announcement. Like, I don't know why we have so many hero shooters in development right now. You have this, you have that Marvel Rivals, I think it's called, that game. Valve is working on something that isn't Team Fortress 2, which is bizarre considering, Valve, you guys invented the hero shooter. Why are you not working on your pre-existing hero shooter? Why are you making something else? It took quite a while for this showcase to actually bring me back in, because the 10 minutes they spent on Concord just drained me. Next thing I want to talk about in this showcase that didn't really interest me, but I still kind of wanted to talk about, was this game called Infinity Nikki. This one is kind of bizarre because I actually stumbled across this game a long time ago and ended up falling down a bit of a rabbit hole afterwards, because the history of this game is just so strange, and I wanted to talk about it. This game is, from what I can tell, the 5th installment of the Nikki series. The odd thing is that the previous games are basically just those old browser-based paper doll-style dress-up games that little girls play, but apparently for this one, they've decided to up the ante and just turn the whole thing into an open-world RPG. This game clearly isn't for me, but it's such a strange game with such a strange history that I had to bring it up. Next thing I wanted to talk about that I have a little bit more to say on is the Silent Hill 2 remake. I'm not the biggest fan of Silent Hill, not because I don't like them, but just because I haven't really had the chance to play a lot of them. That being said, I do know the story of Silent Hill 2. I've seen the cutscenes, I've seen videos of people talking about it, and frankly, I think it's one of the greatest stories ever told in video games, especially when it comes to horror. So I'm glad that people are finally going to be able to experience a modern version of that on modern hardware. It seems like they're kind of trying to do to Silent Hill 2 what Capcom did to Resident Evil 2, where they're kind of bringing the camera in. You know, it no longer has like fixed camera angles with tank controls. Now it's just like a traditional third-person shooter, which can be good, but it can also backfire if they make it too action-heavy. And also, I'm not much of a graphics snob, but the graphics here feel like they need quite a bit more polish. But maybe I'm being a bit unfair because I'm comparing it to the Resident Evil 2 remake, which is an amazing looking game. All the character designs here I like. I like how James looks, I like how all these characters look, except for Maria. And the problem is, it's hard to explain why her new design is bad without either sounding like a pervert or spoiling the whole game. Simply put, without spoiling too much, her whole character is supposed to be the polar opposite of the character Mary, which is the late wife of the main character, James. While Mary's design is very reserved to match her subdued personality, Maria's design is more provocative to match her more confident personality. There's way more to it than that, but just know that changing Maria's outfit to be more reserved removed removes a pretty major element of not just her character, but the story as a whole. So if you see other people complaining about this online, just know it's not the average "they made the sexy lady less sexy" argument, but they actually have a pretty valid reason to be upset. All in all, I'm pretty mixed on what I've seen from this remake so far, but I'm hoping they reel me back in at some point because I want to be excited about this. The one that really surprised me, as it did pretty much everyone else from what I can tell online, is Astrobot, which is a sequel to Astros Playroom, which is the game that basically is packed onto every PS5 and effectively works as a tech demo for the system. I actually really enjoyed Astros Playroom despite it just being a tech demo, so I'm happy to see that they're doing more with this character. That being said, it does say a lot about this showcase that Astrobot seems to be the main highlight that people have been talking about online. Final verdict for this showcase is that they had a few interesting things to show off, but not a lot new. There's a reason why I only have like 4 things listed off here, and it's because there wasn't a lot new here, just new trailers for other stuff that we've already seen before. It was kind of a weak start to the showcase season, because this was the first showcase. The next showcase that happened was Summer Game Fest proper, which is basically Jeff Keighley's attempt at pretty much replacing E3. And his attempt has been, he's basically just given other people a time and platform to have their own showcases, and that includes the larger companies. Basically just a rally to retain tradition. The show actually started out pretty strong, with Jeff actually mentioning the layoffs that have been happening all throughout the industry lately, and putting a major spotlight on indie developers, which is something that the industry really needs right now. The industry really needs somebody with the platform of Jeff Keighley to call out these bigger companies, which is why people have actually been criticizing Jeff Keighley on this for months now, that he hasn't been speaking out, that he hasn't been mentioning it. So it's good to see him finally take that criticism to heart and talk about it on such a big stage. After that, the first thing that really caught my eyes was LEGO Horizon Adventures. This one is weird, and not just for the concept, but also because why is this here and not at the State of Play? Considering the State of Play was already pretty much barren, you'd think that they would want as many announcements as possible. But just in general, I don't really know why this exists to begin with. Is Horizon really this popular? I never see anybody talk about the Horizon games. Like, I would expect some sort of spin-off like this to be for God of War, considering God of War is probably PlayStation's biggest franchise. Plus, just the idea of a LEGO God of War just sounds objectively funny. The idea of like a PG retelling of the first 3 God of War games just sounds really funny to me. LEGO's done crazier things, it could totally work. And also, it would just be a good way to kind of bring people up to speed with God of War, considering we have these new God of War games, but a lot of people that play these new God of War games have never even seen gameplay of the old ones. So the idea of a game that's basically just an abridged version of the original trilogy might actually be beneficial to some people. And on top of it being a comedic retelling with LEGO characters, I think could actually lend it some genuine charm for both classic fans and newcomers. But yeah, as for LEGO Horizon, I guess it looks okay. I guess. It's coming to Switch, which is surprising. It's not a PlayStation exclusive. Everything about this game is odd to me. Just like conceptually, the fact that it's not at the PlayStation showcase, and just the fact that it exists at all, and the fact that it's multi-plat. I don't know. This game shouldn't exist. It scares me. I don't know. The next thing that interested me after LEGO Horizon was a little game by the name of Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero, otherwise known as Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 4. I am a big Dragon Ball fan and have been pretty much since about, I don't know, I was like 13, 14 maybe? But funny enough, I didn't get into Dragon Ball with the anime. I actually got into it with these 3D arena fighters like Budokai Tenkaichi and Raging Blast. The way I was introduced into Dragon Ball was through Raging Blast and Team 4-Star. And since then, obviously I've watched the show, I've played even more games, I've read the manga, I am a Dragon Ball super fan. And the last time we had one of these 3D brawlers was I think back in like 2016 with Xenoverse 2. And that was like a weird live service game with RPG elements and like custom characters characters. It's been even longer since we've had just a normal 3D brawler. So the fact that we're now getting another Budokai Tenkaichi that now has like all the Dragon Ball Super characters in it, it's very exciting. I just hope they also introduce some of the characters that are currently only in the manga, like Moro and Granola. Like, you could fill half the roster with just different variants of Gas and Moro, frankly. The next thing I want to talk about isn't even really a new game, but a new publishing studio that was announced. Blumhouse, the film studio famous for producing horror movies, are now dipping their toes into the video game industry as a publisher for indie horror games. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of horror games. I'm very picky about them. There are some that I like and some that I don't like, and I don't really even know which ones are which until I play them. But it is cool seeing a company like this take a dive into the industry. It's funny to think back to a time like 2012 when the biggest companies in gaming decided that horror games were basically poison, turning franchises like Resident Evil into fast-paced third-person shooters, and comparing that era to nowadays where we've been experiencing a sort of horror renaissance for the past decade now. Another game that I kind of wanted to touch on quickly was a game called Wanderstop, which is a farming sim from the people that made the Stanley Parable, or at least that's what it seems like. At a cursory glance, this seems ridiculous, the idea of the people behind the Stanley Parable making a farming sim where you're brewing tea and stuff. Thing is, the people behind the Stanley Parable are making it. The Stanley Parable is a very weird game, and the trailer makes it very clear that there's something going on just beneath the surface, that not all of what we see in this trailer is what it seems. So that right there is enough to pique my interest. I gotta know what story they're trying to tell and what kind of weird gameplay mechanics are gonna factor in here. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, because I'm me, is Sonic X Shadow Generations, a remaster of one of my favorite Sonic games with new levels and a new story added in. When Sonic Generations first came out, I actually expected it to be more of a platform for DLC. It just seemed like the kind of game that I would just continue to add on to over time. Considering the concepts for the levels were already made, all they had to do was just remake the levels with boost mechanics in mind. I was a stupid kid, I didn't understand how game design worked. But it's cool seeing them finally create an actual expansion for this game over a decade later. So eventually, in a way, my wish came true. To just touch on the shadow portion of the game, my thoughts can pretty much be summarized in a single word. Terios. I'm not going to explain what that means, but anybody who knows, Terios. They made it real, and just from that alone, they have my money. Next up, Fatal Fury characters are coming to Street Fighter 6. I'm a pretty casual fighting game fan. I only recently learned what zoning and footseeing are, but I do know enough to know that this is a pretty big deal. Street Fighter and Fatal Fury is a rivalry almost as old as Mario and Sonic, if not older. So the idea of a new crossover is big. There used to be quite a few crossover fighting games between SNK and Capcom characters. In fact, Capcom and SNK used to take turns developing them. But the last crossover we had was a card game on the DS. So it's nice seeing Terry and Mai finally get to square off against Ryu and Chun-Li again after all these years. Once again, this is a big deal, and it's really cool seeing this happen again. Final verdict for Summer Game Fest is, it was okay. Not a ton of heavy hitters, but a couple cool things. I did kinda tune out after the 5-minute long mobile game commercial that felt like it went on for an eternity. My only takeaway from that part was that Kim Jong needs to fire his agent. Like now. How do you go from the Hangover movies to dancing in a chicken suit on a mobile game ad? You poor, poor man. Next up we have the Xbox Showcase, which came up the same day that I made a whole video about how they suck now. And boy did they have a lot of fun smearing the egg in my face by having, honestly, one of the best showcases they've ever had, if not at the very least in recent memory, because I have a lot to talk about with this one. First of all, we have Doom the Dark Ages, which did actually get leaked a while ago, but this is the first time we're actually seeing gameplay of the thing. To my understanding, this is a prequel to the entire Doom series, where the Doomslayer is now fighting demons in the medieval ages. This confuses me a lot, honestly, because I was under the impression that the Doomslayer's origin was that he was the Doom Doom guy from the original games after being imprisoned for a couple hundred or so years. And the Doom guy's origin was that he was just a space marine that was sent to Mars because he struck his commanding officer. So when was he sent back to medieval times? I'm just gonna assume that was explained in the Doom Eternal DLC that I didn't play, because I know that DLC did introduce the concept of there being multiple Doomslayers and they called themselves knights or something. But also, I tend to associate this aesthetic of medieval architecture with giant monsters and sci-fi weaponry with the Quake series, rather than Doom. I know that at one point id was working on a Quake reboot, but it's been a few years since I've heard anything about it. And that kinda makes me wonder if this game is potentially the Quake reboot worked into a Doom game? I have no proof of that though. I haven't heard anything about the Quake reboot getting cancelled or anything. That is all just a theory. A game theory! That being said, the game still looks cool regardless. It's more Doom, so just on that merit, I'm interested. Starfield's getting a new expansion. I'm a massive Bethesda fan, but Starfield sadly just doesn't interest me at all. At this point, I'm just waiting for anything relating to Elder Scrolls 6. Just a logo drop alone would be enough for me. There's some documents that released during the FTC case that said that they were shooting for a 2026 release date, so I really thought this would be the year that we would hear something about it. Literally anything, just a name drop. But sadly, nothing. But you can play as a ghoul in Fallout 76 now, which is pretty cool. The only other Fallout game to let you play as a ghoul is Brotherhood of Steel, and the less said about that game, the better. Outside of Bethesda news, a new game that looks right up my alley is Expedition 33. A game that at first glance you would never expect to be a turn-based RPG. The story and world of this game is fascinating. Basically, there's this girl that lives on an island that paints a number on a tower, and everyone that's of the age that corresponds to that number dies. And the number keeps ticking down every year. So this game follows a group of people going to the island to stop this girl from painting the numbers, to stop this cycle of death. This is the type of weird fantasy storytelling that I absolutely love, and this is definitely on my radar now. South of Midnight is a game that we saw a little bit of last year, and I liked what I saw. But this time we actually saw some gameplay. It's not what I expected, that's for sure. It's a rural Louisiana-flavored character action game where you play as this lady with magical powers and her giant talking catfish. I've heard people calling this game Bayonetta and Creole May Cry. Overall, this also looks right up my alley, but I do have some concerns, mostly with the game's stylistic choices. See, this game has this very choppy, stop-motion looking frame rate that is most likely inspired by the aesthetics of something like the Spider-Verse movies. And it looks great in cutscenes, but in gameplay, I'm a bit worried. I've seen other games attempt stop-motion aesthetics in the past. I'm pretty sure there are a couple Lego games that did it, and it looks fine there. But in an action game where you're most likely going to have to dodge out of the way of enemy attacks, every frame matters. So a choppy frame rate might be cool from a stylistic perspective, but I am a bit skeptical from a gameplay perspective. Either way though, the game looks really cool, and the story has me invested. Just in general, it's a setting we haven't seen before, and just that alone gets me excited. And then we have Metal Gear Solid Delta, the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. We finally got to see more of this game after I straight up peeked the mic out of excitement on stream last year. This was something that Metal Gear fans have been asking for years, and it's finally becoming a thing. Similar to Silent Hill, Metal Gear is a series that I haven't really gotten into, but I've always been interested in it. The story of Metal Gear is just such an insanely weird espionage story with giant robots and cyber ninjas. I've always watched from the sidelines thinking these games looked so cool. The only problem is that the controls of these games just really haven't aged the best. So a faithful remake with modernized controls sounds like exactly what I've been looking for. So unlike the Silent Hill 2 remake, I'm very excited for this, and I'm glad to see fans seem happy about it too. And then my foot goes into my mouth and down my throat, because we finally got gameplay of Perfect Dark. And I must admit, contrary to what I said in my last video, This is not just another first-person shooter that you can crap out once a year. It appears like they're turning Perfect Dark into an immersive sim in the same vein as something like Deus Ex or BioShock, which is frankly a perfect direction for the series considering the levels in the original game were already more open objective-based levels that prioritize exploration. An immersive sim just feels like the next step in the series' evolution. That being said, I'm not gonna say this game is out of development hell just yet, because we still don't have a release date. Even Beyond Good and Evil 2 has shown gameplay in the past, and that game's never coming out. Give me a release date, and then I'll be happy. On the opposite end of development woes, we have the Fable Reboot, which does have a release date, but every time I see it, I get a little more worried. From what I can tell now, it appears this game will focus on a predetermined character rather than one you build on your own throughout your playthrough. There doesn't seem to be any focus on the power of choice and morality that was the core element of the original trilogy, and I still have yet to see any of the life sim elements that made the original game so unique compared to its contemporaries. If it's not been made clear yet, I'm a huge fan of the Fable games. Even Fable 3 I enjoy for what it is. So I have very high standards for a reboot, and sadly, nothing I see in this trailer lives up to those standards. And no, this has nothing to do with how the protagonist looks. I think she looks fine. But with all that said, in a game like this, I'd rather be able to make my own protagonist regardless. I didn't like that in Fable 3, you're pigeonholed into the role of the prince with little to no wiggle room. And sadly, it feels like they're going in that direction rather than Fable 2, where after the prologue, you can become whoever you want. A mercenary, a blacksmith, a slumlord. And I'm just not seeing any of that here. Heck, we haven't really seen much of anything from this game, and it's releasing next year. We've seen less of this game than we've seen of Perfect Dark, which is still years away, and that's extremely worrying. I want to be excited for this game, and I desperately want to be wrong, but I've just been burned way too many times by franchises that I love for me to trust a studio that's only made racing games up until now. So, as I'm cooling down, let's talk about another game. Life is Strange Double Exposure. In my Best Games of the 2010s video, I said that Life is Strange was my favorite game to come out in 2015, but I also said that I hadn't played The Witcher 3 yet, and that my opinion might change after playing that game. And since then, I have played The Witcher 3, and now, The Witcher 3 is my second favorite game to come out in 2015. I don't know what it is about the game, I really don't. I just like it, and I couldn't tell you why, even if I wanted to. There have been other Life is Strange games since, and I played a couple of them, but I haven't really come back to the series fully since Before the Storm, which was a prequel where you play as Chloe. But now, in Double Exposure, you're playing as Max again. This game is a direct sequel to the original, which we haven't actually had in the series before outside of comics. So yeah, this is the first time in a minute that I've actually been properly interested in the Life is Strange game, because I finally get to be reunited with my skinny hipster friend to see what she's been up to after all this time. Then we have Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, a game I was not expecting to look as good as it does. This might be how I get my dad into video games, I don't know. Just in general, it's a new Indiana Jones adventure. It looks like a fun and frantic first-person shooter, and the writing feels like it came right out of an Indiana Jones movie. Just as long as it's better than Dial of Destiny, I think this might be worth people's time. Next up, we have Avowed, Obsidian's first-person RPG set in the Pillars of Eternity universe. The more I see of this game, the more excited I get. I just have to say, this is not an Elder Scrolls game. I'm only saying this because when Outer Worlds came out, a bunch of New Vegas fans hyped it up to literally be New Vegas 2, and when it wasn't exactly like that, they threw a tantrum and basically ruined that game's reputation. So I'm saying this now, don't try comparing this game to anything that isn't Pillars of Eternity, because that's what this is. It's Pillars of Eternity with a first-person camera. Don't expect an Elder Scrolls killer. Expect Pillars of Eternity with a first-person camera. If that sounds like fun to you, then you should be interested in this game. As am I. Finally, we have Gears of War E-Day, a prequel to the whole Gears of War series. I'm not a huge fan of Gears. It's pretty obvious that I've always been more of a Halo guy, but I at least know enough to understand that in the lore, E-Day was basically the Gears equivalent to Contact Harvest or the Fall of Reach, the whole instigating force of the whole series. I've actually been thinking lately about getting into the Gears games, because I've always kind had considered Gears a sort of sister series to Halo, just because I've always seen it as the other Xbox shooter series. Also, the fact that I own nearly all the games except for 2, 5, and Tactics just through bundles and games with gold back when that was a thing. But I just never got around to actually playing them. So maybe it's high time that I give these games a shot. And maybe by the time that E-Day comes out, I'll be a fully fledged fan, you never know. Final verdict for the Xbox showcase: I still haven't forgiven Microsoft for what they did to Arcane and Tango, and I think the majority of my last video on them still stands. But I have to give credit where credit is due. This is a great showcase, but that's all it was. A showcase. It'll take some serious action and follow through for my opinions on them to actually change. Finally, we have the Nintendo Direct, which started off ridiculously strong with Mario and Luigi Brothership. We thought the Mario and Luigi series was dead. It's very clear that Nintendo is going in hard on their Mario RPGs all of a sudden, with the remakes of Super Mario RPG and Thousand Year Door, and now an all-new Mario and Luigi game that I have to emphasize, we thought was dead. As someone with a lot of nostalgia for Super Mario RPG specifically, and as someone who's just now getting into Paper Mario after all these years, I might have to give this game a shot at some point. Plus, I've never actually played any of the Mario and Luigi games before, but I've always wanted to on account that they're just more Mario RPGs. Hopefully Brothership is a good jumping on point, because I definitely want to play this when it comes out. And then Donkey Kong Country returns in Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. That's a lot of returning and a lot of Donkey Konging. There's not much to say about this one. They're remastering Donkey Kong Country Returns. Honestly, I just hope that this means that they're ramping up for a new installment at some point, because I think these are just fun games and I want to see more of them. Also, Square Enix is remastering the original Dragon Quest trilogy, which is cool. I've been wanting to get into the Dragon Quest series for a while now, so maybe this will be my jumping off point. It looks like they're going for that Octopath aesthetic, where it's 2D sprites on a 3D plane. It looks really nice, so I might pick these up and make them my first look into Dragon Quest. All I ask at this point from Square Enix is to please give Chrono Trigger the same treatment. I would love a Chrono Trigger remaster. Please, God, please. Please remember Chrono Trigger. Here's a weird one. M-rated games are coming to NSO. Turok and Perfect Dark specifically were confirmed, which is cool. Although I could have sworn Turok was already available to buy on the eShop, but whatever. It's nice to see this because it opens up doors for stuff like Conker's Bad Fur Day and Resident Evil 2, or even Mortal Kombat 4 coming to Switch. And then Nintendo took us for a ride with Marvel, baby! Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Classics Collection. This is something fighting game fans have been begging Capcom for years now, and they finally got it. The ability to play these games on modern hardware with online functionality is a huge deal. These games have been trapped between layers and layers and layers of licensing disputes and all kinds of crap. It's been a mess for nearly a decade. People just trying to get this game more attention. Because Marvel wouldn't play ball, Disney wouldn't play ball, Capcom wouldn't play ball. There was always something in the way, and now the impossible has been achieved. These games are going to be playable on modern hardware. All you have to see to know how big of a deal this is go look at Maximilian Dude's reaction to it. That's all you need to see to just know. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is a new 2D Zelda game. The first new 2D Zelda game that's not a remake or some gimmicky multiplayer type game since 2013 with Link Between Worlds, which is just insane to think about that it's been that long. But also, this is the first game where Zelda is the protagonist. Unless you count the CDI games, which you shouldn't. This is yet another game from this Direct that is a huge deal. How has it taken this long for not just another 2D Zelda game, but a Zelda game where you play as Zelda? People have made this joke for decades now, the fact that the character the game is named after isn't the one you play as. And finally, here we are playing Zelda as Zelda. Honestly, all I have to say at this point is, it took you long enough. Wanna know something else huge? Metroid Prime 4! My love, I never thought I'd see you again. It's been 7 years! 7 long, painful years, but finally, you've come back to me. It just looks so good. It's been a few days and I'm still reeling from it. The best part? Sylux! Sylux is here from Metroid Prime Hunters! He looks so good! It all looks so good! I'm sorry I'm gushing, but I cannot believe this time we finally have confirmation that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is coming out next year. 2025 is already confirmed to be an absolutely stacked year for gaming, and I, for one, cannot wait. Final verdict for the Nintendo Direct is this honestly might be the best Nintendo Direct we've ever gotten. A perfect mix of first and third party games, a good variety of genres were shown off. It really felt like they went out of their way to make sure there was something here for everyone. The only thing that would have made this even better would be something completely out of left field, like a new F-Zero or a Kid Icarus Uprising remaster. Please, Nintendo, give me a Kid Icarus Uprising remaster. I need that in my life. So, just for fun, who won not E3 this year? Certainly not PlayStation, that's for sure. I think it's funny that there were more meaningful PlayStation announcements at all the other showcases than there were at the PlayStation showcase. Honestly, I think it's really close between Xbox and Nintendo, but I kinda have to give it to Nintendo. And it's not just because I'm mad at Xbox, but because there were a lot of great games shown at Xbox, but a lot of it was stuff we already knew about, or there were third parties. Meanwhile, Nintendo, there were so many heavy-hitting first-party games that people have been asking for years. Just in general, this was a great showcase season, though. There were a lot of great games shown off. I'm very happy with what I've seen. Genuinely, next year is gonna be incredible for gaming. But, with all that said, thanks for watching. If you like this video, leave a like and become a pyromaniac yourself by subscribing. Until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.